Hey Diane, good to see you again. I heard you wanted to know more about how to begin the process of thinking from a systems perspective. If you remember the last time we talked about how a system is a group of interacting, interrelated, or interdependent components that work together as a whole to accomplish something. So a pile of gears and screws put together in a bowl are not a system, but if they come together to make a watch, that's a system. So if you want to know how to start looking at things from a systems perspective, you should start to look at events that are happening, the patterns underneath those events, the structure underneath that, and the mental models underneath all that. And with some practice, you'll start to see things. That's a lot of jargon, but maybe I can explain it to you this way. Last time we talked about how scaffolding failing, uh, we use scaffolding failing as an example. The foreman is on the ground and he can only see the guy that's closest to him. And so he maybe catches a glimpse of the guy putting up the scaffolding and seeing it break down and fail. And of course, he thinks that this guy setting it up is to blame. But if you want to go from linear thinking to system thinking, you need to get a fuller picture. So maybe the only way that foreman can get a fuller picture is to get on top of a neighboring building and look down at the whole construction crew doing the work there. Maybe he would see then that there are guys rushing to offload the truck and they're actually giving the guy wrong scaffolding for what he needs to do there. He's giving him wrong nuts and bolts and crossbars. Or maybe he would see that the boards are compromised. These guys are just taking boards off, putting them on their shoulder and sliding them up. But maybe there's some cracks and there's some issues with the boards. Or that there's a team member in charge of quality control that's too busy paying attention to something else, that he doesn't look at what's going on with the guy over here with the scaffolding. Or maybe it's not obvious at all. But this is called going from the dance floor to the balcony. Sometimes the only way you can see what's really happening in the whole dance that's happening is to get up on the balcony. So that's a good way of looking at it. You have an event, you have a pattern that happens consistently. And the structure underneath, there's things going wrong with that structure, and then a lot of assumptions underneath all of that. So we also talked about how churches are a lot different than scaffolding because it's a social system. It's more complicated. So you may need to do some exploration into how people think. This is the mental models that I talked about. It's the thought process that people have about how something works. So we gave an example of a worship leader last time, and if the worship isn't good on the Sunday mornings, common sense would say that it's the worship leader and that the worship leader needs to go. And that is a mental model that may be shared by the elders, the deacons, the pastor. But if you see it happening again and again, sometimes you have to step out. And the best way to do this, because oftentimes we're part of the systems that we're in, and so if we're in a church, we're part of that. Maybe we have to step out and look at it from a consultant type of view, or even like a detective, to really figure out what's going on and to look at things more objectively. So I used the example last time too of like the worship leader. Normally we just think get rid of the worship leader, but maybe the congregation is divided into what music they like, or the music just isn't attracting the talent that needs to come together. Or, maybe we have to just go to different churches to actually see how they run things versus the way that we're running things to even see what's going on. So this is the difference between systems thinking and linear thinking. And you're using systems thinking when you don't jump to just the first natural conclusion that you have. But when you take a step back and you even look at the culture and the assumptions of the people around you and the way they think the world works, sometimes the flaw is in there. And that's a good way of seeing if something else is at play. So remember, if you want to think systems thinking, try to go up to the balcony, see the bigger picture, try to look at it from kind of a consultant's point of view or a detective, and then eventually you start to see that it's not just one thing leading to another, but it's actually a web of things. So good to see you again, Diane. Hope to talk to you soon. Hope I answered your question.